Welcome to episode number 40, the big 40. In today's episode, we're going to talk about limiting beliefs. We're going to talk about Scotland. We're going to talk about Meat Loaf, not the singer. We're going to talk about the meat and how to overcome these limiting beliefs that are out there. You're not going to want to miss this one. Stay tuned. So the big question is, how do ambitious people like us who grew up listening to the old advice of go to school, work hard for 40 years, and retire when you're old, create a life today that is meaningful, abundant, healthy, and brings joy, while also leading a life that is productive and full of achievement? That is the question, and this is the podcast that will help give you the answers that you're searching for. My name is Del Denny, and welcome to the Upgrade Your Life podcast. All right, so first I want to start with a story, and it involves a young married couple, newlyweds, and the wife, she wants to do something special for her husband, so she wants to bake him or make him a nice meal. And so she gets out a recipe book, and it's one of her family recipes that's been passed down from generation to generation. And it's a meatloaf recipe. And she's really excited to share this new meal and pass down this tradition. And so she fixed this beautiful meatloaf. And so she bakes it in the oven, and she pulls it out, puts it on the table, and the husband looks at it, and it smells so good. But he looks at it, and he notices the ends are cut off on the meatloaf. Tastes absolutely delicious, but it was kind of weird that the ends of the meatloaf are cut off. Well, anyways, next month rolls by, and his new wife bakes the meatloaf again, and same thing happens. She gets that recipe out, and the meatloaf gets put on the table, and again, the ends of the meatloaf is cut off. And he's a little perplexed by this, and he doesn't want to offend his new wife, but asks, honey, why are the edges cut off? And she sat there and kind of puzzled and looked at it and thought, I'm not quite sure. That's just how the recipe calls for it, to cut off the ends of the meatloaf. I guess it just makes the flavor better. And so they were talking about it, trying to figure out why the ends were cut off. And then she's like, I'll just call my mother. My mother taught me how to make this recipe, so I'll give her a call. She'll definitely have the answer. So anyways, they call up the mother, and the mother, they start talking about the meatloaf, and she goes, Mom, why do we cut off the ends of the meatloaf? Does it do something with the flavor? Does it seal it in? Why do we do that? And the mother kind of sat there and, was quiet for a second. She said, I really don't know. I don't know why we do it that way. That's why I learned it from your grandmother. Let's get your grandmother on the phone. So they call up the grandmother. Hey, Grandma. Hey, we got a question for you about your meatloaf. And she was like, okay, well, what do you have for me? Why do we cut the ends of the meatloaf off? What does that do? Does it seal in the flavor? Does it cook faster? What does it do? And she started laughing. She goes, well, let me tell you a story about that meatloaf. When I was early on in my marriage, we didn't have a lot. And we had this tiny, tiny, tiny little oven. And the only way that we could get the meatloaf in the oven was if we cut the ends of the meat off. That way we could fit it in the oven. And so how funny is it that got passed down from generation to generation to generation without question of why do we have to cut the ends of the meatloaf off? And that is a lot like limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are passed down from generation to generation to generation, and often we don't question the origin of these limiting beliefs, and we keep on with this pattern because that's just how it's always done. And if we do that, we are really limited on our progression, and we limit ourselves on our potential if we really believe that, hey, it's been done this way all of our lives, and we have to continue to do it this way. And that's just simply something that I cannot accept. And I'm going to venture to say that if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably the same way. You realize that there are other ways to do things. There could even be better ways to do things. And I'll give you an example for my own life. I grew up in Indiana, in the United States, a little farm town. And I thought that traveling the world was something that a lot of people could do, but I didn't really believe that I could do it. I didn't think this young kid from Indiana would ever see the world. It was exciting. I always wanted to travel. Well, long story short, I've been all over the world. I've been to Europe many, many, many times, and I love going over there. And last fall, I was in Scotland, and I was telling my fiance that story of growing up, thinking I would never get to this spot. Like we were walking through the streets of Edinburgh, Scotland, and I was telling her, like, I didn't think I would ever make it to this place. I didn't think I would ever get to see Europe. And I started thinking about it. I was like, what other limiting beliefs do I have? Because I think we always have limiting beliefs. So I started questioning myself. I need to think bigger. I need to do bigger things. And so that's really the message of today is, what limiting beliefs do we have and how do we overcome them? And so I think the first way that we overcome limiting beliefs is we start questioning why we do things the way that we do them, right? Really take stock of that. Just like the meatloaf, why do we cut the ends of this off? Why do I have to go to school? Why do I have to work a 9-to-5 job? Why can't I be an entrepreneur? Why? Ask yourself why. And whenever there's a problem, I always like to ask myself why 5 times. Well, why is it done this way? Okay, well, why is it done that way? Okay, if it's done that way, well, why is it done that way? And as you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, you can see the problem with that, and that can help you overcome it. The second way to overcome these limiting beliefs is your gut already probably tells you how to improve, or it should be done a different way. And most of the time, your gut is right. Now, here's the third one. Now, this is the tough one, I find, is that when you make those improvements, when you make those changes, people want to criticize you. People want to give you their opinions. Not that they're trying to hurt you, but really they're trying to help you. And so whenever we're trying to be better, people want to give their own opinions. And a lot of times they think they're keeping you safe, but they don't realize they're projecting their own limiting beliefs on you. So you have to be very careful with that. And so there is a pattern, if you will, whenever there's change, and it goes like this. First is change, then is resistance, and then there's acceptance, and then there's growth. So I'll say that again. Change, then resistance, then acceptance, then growth. And there's always that formula. Whenever there's something happening there and there's a change, there's going to be a pattern there. And if you have the endurance to go through that stage, eventually it's going to be the growth. But you have to remember it. Now, where people fall short is they make the change, they get the criticism, they get the resistance, and they buckle and they go back to the old ways. And growth never comes from going back to your old ways. And so if you remember that pattern, you can really overcome those limiting beliefs. And so that's the message of today is how do we overcome limiting beliefs? What limiting beliefs are holding us back? Hey, it's time to take stock. It's time to take inventory of those limiting beliefs. So hopefully that helps. And those stories help a little bit to help you overcome your own limiting beliefs. I know I have many that I have to overcome, and we'll never get to the point where we're perfect. Once we get over one belief, we have to overcome another. And so that's it for today's podcast. Hey, if you could do me a huge favor, could you subscribe? I would really appreciate that every time we have a new episode. That way you're notified. And also if you could leave me a comment or a review, I would much appreciate that. That helps us to grow the podcast. Those fancy little algorithms that are out there, the more that you respond and engage, that just helps out more people. It helps us to rank a little bit higher. So if you could do that for me, I would appreciate it. But that's it for today. Remember, learn, lead, and live to your full potential.